It was then that the fear turned to madness. The villagers, unable to ignore the growing unease, decided to do something that no one should ever consider. They chose to exhume Petar Blagojevic's body. The grave was opened on a cold, moonless night. The air was thick with tension as the earth was dug up, the sound of shovels scraping against the dirt breaking the silence. And when they finally opened the casket, what they found was not a man who had peacefully passed, but something else entirely. Petar's body was eerily well preserved, showing no signs of decay. His hair had grown unnaturally long, his beard had thickened, and his skin appeared disturbingly fresh, as if he had only just lain down for a nap. The villagers recoiled in horror, unable to look away. But it wasn't just his appearance that frightened them. It was the blood. Dark, thick blood was smeared around his mouth, as if he had been feeding after his death. The villagers were convinced this was no ordinary death. This was the work of a creature they had feared for centuries, a vampire. Despite the protests of their local official, Cameral Provisor Frombald, who had arrived with the priest to witness the exhumation, the villagers were resolute. They could not wait. They had to ensure that this creature, if it truly was a vampire, would not return to torment them. They had to act before the village was destroyed by whatever dark power had claimed their neighbors. What happened next was enough to send chills down your spine. As the villagers performed their ritual, staking the body of Petar Blagojevic through the heart, something strange occurred. Though the body had been dead for days, fresh blood poured from his ears and mouth, as if the man, if he was even a man, was still alive. The ground around the grave seemed to tremble, and the air grew colder with each passing second. The villagers, now completely convinced of the evil that had come to haunt them, took no chances. They burned the body to ensure that Petar Blagojevic could never rise again. But the horror didn't end there. The story of this strange event spread like wildfire, and the village of Kisiljevo became a place of legend. Word reached other parts of Eastern Europe, and what was once a small tale of superstition grew into something far larger, an entire vampire hysteria that spread across the continent. Writers, like Bram Stoker, would later immortalize such stories, fueling the myth of Dracula and all the creatures that lurked in the dark. Was Petar Blagojevic truly a vampire? Or was it the work of the human imagination, driven by fear, disease, and superstition? Perhaps we'll never know. But in the village of Kisiljevo, the shadows still carry the story of a man who may never have truly died, and a terror that would never fully leave the people who lived through it. So, when the wind blows cold and the night stretches long, remember this story, and the next time you hear a rustling in the shadows, don't be too quick to dismiss it, because sometimes, just sometimes, the things we fear most may not be as far from us as we think. In the dark corners of Eastern Europe, where the nights seem longer and the wind carries whispers from forgotten times, there's a story that chills even the bravest hearts. A story of a village, a man, and the terror that followed his death. It is a tale from Kisiljevo, a small isolated village tucked away in the misty hills of Serbia, where the line between myth and reality is thin, and where fear lingers in every shadow. Petar Blagojevic was no different from any other peasant in his village. Born in 1662, he lived a humble life, but in 1725, Petar's death would mark the beginning of a nightmare that would never leave the village. He passed quietly, at least that's what they believed. But after his death, strange events began to unfold, and they were not of this world. It started with the illness. 9 villagers died within 8 days, all struck down by a mysterious fever. But what made these deaths more terrifying was the strange stories the victims told before they died. One by one, they each spoke of the same chilling vision. Each claimed in their final moments that they had been strangled or choked by someone they knew. But the one thing they all agreed on was that the person who had attacked them had already died. The village was in a state of panic. As the death toll rose, so did the fear. Something unnatural was happening, and the villagers, though terrified, whispered to one another that it could only mean one thing: the dead had returned. Petar Blagojevic's widow, in the wake of her husband's passing, had a story of her own. She spoke of hearing her husband's voice in the dead of night, calling out to her, asking for something as simple as shoes. But when she went to meet him, she was greeted by a chilling presence, cold, unearthly, and wrong. In sheer terror, she fled the village, leaving behind her home, her life, and everything she had known. But the worst was yet to come. As the days passed, more and more villagers spoke of sightings, of Petar appearing in their dreams, standing at their doors, demanding food, demanding something, anything. They said he seemed different, not quite human, his eyes hollow and dark. The stories grew more disturbing with every telling. One man even claimed that Petar had visited him in the night and had tried to enter his home. His father's cold, decayed hands had reached for him, but the son had slammed the door. Terrified beyond belief,